Welcome to the Effortless Mindfulness Podcast. I'm Loch Kelly, and here I share talks and deep dialogues with leading experts in the field of meditation, psychology, and neuroscience. Together we'll explore how everyday people like you and me can live an awakened life of clarity and compassion. You'll also find micro meditations in every podcast episode. If you want to try more of these, you can go to mindfulglimpses.com to download the new app to experience immediate benefits, because the love and peace we're all seeking is already here, anywhere, anytime. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome, everyone. It's my great pleasure today to be here dialoguing with my friend and colleague, Tara Brach. Welcome, Tara.
I feel really delighted to be with you, Loch.
Yes, so wonderful to have a chance, with all the busy schedules, to dive deeply into things that we both love and are kind of have a vision to share with others, and now we can share together and while others listen.
Yeah, it's my idea of a good Dharma party.
Yes, that's right. This is what I love. So, I know that, you just, whenever I get a chance to hear you and what you're doing, I get natural sympathetic joy. So it's like, oh, effortless sympathetic joy arising, because, yeah, go, Tara, go.
Well, I'm glad I'm serving in that way. And it's mutual, of course. I feel like we've been tracking each other for a good number of years.
Yeah. So I just wanted to start with that, just to say that it's a delight. And just to begin, by talking a little about, I noticed that your book, which I am rereading, Radical Acceptance, published about 20 years ago. But as I read it, it was like, oh, it's almost like it's your new book, because it's literally the themes are what we're both still talking about and almost are still cutting edge. So I wondered, like, as you kind of look at it today, what's new, what's the same, what is kind of the core of what you were communicating then that's fresh now?
Oh, thank you for that invitation. Yeah, so 20th anniversary edition, and it's got, a new chapter and a new forward and introducing the rain meditation and so on. And I wanted to do this. I wanted to have the chance to bring it forward again. It feels like this is such a time of just getting divided, the dividedness, the hostility, the contempt, and it's amongst so many of us. I feel myself going into that kind of dividedness and demoting others in my mind because of their views, and it just felt so important. It feels like the only healing for these times is waking up consciousness, awake awareness, and an awake heart. And so I wanted to really make it fully relevant to these times, including our identities, how we get caught in social identities and don't see each other. We really don't see who's there. And including, how we forget our belonging to this larger living planet and don't navigate in a way that's sensitive and conscious. So it felt the time. Radical acceptance basically means to completely allow, without any resistance or opposition, the experience that's unfolding. And in that allowing, we open to a presence that has the kind of intelligence and compassion that can respond. So it's not passive, it's actually the grounds for activism, but more spiritually rooted activism.
Yes.
So thank you for inviting that out, because I'm excited to bring consciousness practices into the world that are so linked to what is going on right now.
Yeah. As you say, it's, as social animals, there is a tendency to want to be part of a group and to bond, but then that connection that keeps us in the more family or smaller sense and creates this otherness that makes us feel that movement to the bigger we, to the global family, is what's needed by, but not just through politics or actions, but also through transformation of consciousness, which is really seeing that we are the same and that we're passionately, no matter what the view is, passionately feeling that we're protecting something valuable by trying to hold a position about it.
I love the way you're framing it, because I often think of the whole evolution of consciousness as waking up to that belonging, knowing that, but it's not intellectual. It has to be a felt sense that the life that's living through you, the awareness that's looking through your eyes, is completely the same. And that's what wakes up caring. And it's interesting, right before we connected here, I was reading an article in Scientific American that has to do with insects being sentient and having feelings, feeling pain and joy. And I feel like it takes really training our attention to wake up past some idea of a hierarchy where humans are better, more worthwhile, and between humans where different groups feel better are more worthwhile. And it's very much part of our survival brain to actually make those differences, to feel inferior and superior. And yet we have this capacity to wake up out of that. And then that takes, to me, real dedication to sense this living world as sentient. I mean, that's a radical thing, but when we actually feel it, like we
Yes.
look at a tree and there's a sense, I have this mantra, I'll say, we are friends, and then feel the
Uh-huh.
realness of that.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. That,
Everything changes.
it does. Yeah. And through that movement from, like we often do like a research study and then some, great understanding or philosophy. And then what's the practice to actually feel that rather than just think it or understand it or repeat it, because then it becomes a kind of a belief system rather than a lived experience. So there was a study, I think at Dartmouth, where they took groups of people that were all along the spectrum and flashed pictures of people similar and different, and there would be visceral reactions of positivity and visceral reactions, no matter what how liberal or radical or of otherness that made people. So it is this survival instinct, as you say, and it takes that acceptance of that, not negating it or not saying it's bad to have that, or if we're spiritual, we wouldn't feel that. That's, I think, something you and I have in common. It's like, you know what? We're human beings. We got feelings. We got emotions. We got all the default, settings. And the first arrow that arises of, anger or hatred is just arising, and it's, the response that is possible, and the not only response but the compassion to that changes, and the type of compassion, I think, is, we talk about. I think that's the key, because there's kind of levels of compassion or depth of, meditative possibility of discovering, what both you and I talk about is just, being kind, being compassionate, attitude adjustment, positive thinking, and then expression of that, and then a kind of deep discovery of a natural compassion and a loving awareness or open-hearted presence, or that we are the love.
Yeah.
And then we can express or see through those eyes.
Well, that's a powerful, beautiful way of describing both the capacity to cultivate compassion and also the spontaneous compassion that arises when there's a wide open presence.
Mm-hmm.
And if we bring that to what we were just talking about, that we are wired to see difference, we're wired.
Yes.
And so to feel guilty, I've spent a lot of moments investigating white guilt, all the guilt for feeling, I am responsible, I'm not doing enough to alleviate the horror of racial violence. And my own process, just to make it very personal, was just what you were describing, which was I had to face, and this is ongoing, this is not a fait accompli, but face the conditioning that, my mind judged as really ugly, and face it and feel the suffering of it, feel how it actually created separation. It imprisoned me and it made me not know my belonging to others. And it was when I felt the realness of that suffering that I'm putting my hand on my heart because I do that sometimes, that there was a tenderness and an acceptance of, just as you said, this is just this body mind's conditioning. But in that presence, there was a capacity to see beyond the ways that I had been creating separation. And like you said, it takes practice. I have one friend who described how he'd be on the subway and he'd notice himself in that classic, making others other, the unreal other who's less than. And he would then meditate on the word thou. He would just sense them and sense spirit, sacredness, the sentience living through them, and just mentally whisper thou. And it dissolved that separateness. And it's like the gift of bringing our attention to how we create separation, holding it with complete compassion, and then being able to see beyond and start to foster that sense of true belonging. I mean, we can't be alone on this planet if we truly know our belonging to, the insects and the trees and those of different races and onward. And I guess I just keep coming back to there's motivation to do that because there's some deep part of our being, our already awake heart mind, that really longs for that true belonging, not the belonging to a subgroup and feeling, rah, rah, we're the best, but that true belonging, because that's the only way there's, a truly fearless heart and a loving heart is knowing knowing that oneness.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, you just, as you shared personally about your experience, I immediately kind of went back to going early on to Asia and being introduced in a kind of a deep way to meditation, and starting in Sri Lanka, doing 9 months of Vipassana and sight meditation, both at the university and then doing, 5-day retreats, 10-day retreats, 21-day retreats, and then going up and having good fortune of meeting Tibetan teacher Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche and kind of getting a full introduction from all the traditions, having done some Zen before that and kind of feeling they all were connected. But I just remember after having a kind of initial dropping into that meditative insight that's experiential, feeling like, well, do I want to stay and be a monk? And I was like, no, I want to go back to New York City where people are suffering and finish, do a social work degree and, right into my family, because that's where it feels like that, meditation and action leads to almost a kind of a playful, joy of like, we're all kids in a playground, but everyone's innocent and suffering and a little bit crazy.
I love it. It's the essence of the bodhisattva path, the
Mm,
path of an awakening being is, if you know you're belonging, why leave the field of beings that we're all a part of?
mm,
And that doesn't mean that we don't take, as you did, take real time in
mhm. Yeah.
quiet contemplative retreat. But there's something so beautiful and powerful about holding
Mm,
hands and
mm,
helping. I just think of the activity of awareness is love. And
mhm,
of course it gets confused and twisted, and we have all the expressions in the world of cruelty and ignorance. But the original impulse of
mhm.
awareness is love.
Yes. Yeah, that's that expression from its from its freedom and almost absence of negativity, like non-judgmental, almost neutral or free, but then as that non-dual in the sense of that pure awake awareness recognizes not other than aliveness. When we drop deeply, we go, "Uh-oh, there's shame," like, "Oh, there's guilt. Oh, there's that memory of I did all that. And I better, oh, that person did it to me." We go out, we go in, but willing to go deeper and then include this, with a real full on the cushion, off the cushion uh, way um, of being in the unfolding of this awakening, which seems like it's the potential for just human development rather than some esoteric, advanced, Olympic athlete thing.
I'm with you. It feels like that is the hope. And you also are pointing to where the stuck place is and the suffering, which is,
Mm,
um, the activity of awareness is love. There's a basic goodness. And so many people say, well, I can't find it. I don't
yeah.
trust it. If there's basic goodness, how come I feel hatred and anger? And it feels to me like one of the most powerful ways of deepening attention is to start realizing that every emotion is intelligent,
Hmm.
and it gets torqued because we get caught in the sense of a separate self and get all identified and twisted and so on, kind of like a hose that gets twisted and the water's not flowing through. But we can pay attention in a way that naturally untwists, when instead of adding that second arrow that you described of, oh, this is bad or I'm bad,
Hmm.
finding out deep down, right? Really investigating those emotions, anger, and
Mm,
finding right embedded inside anger is an energy that is trying to, in some way, protect us, serve us. It anticipates
mhm,
something is an obstacle to our unfolding. And if we can sense, I think of it as life loving life, that there's a life
mm,
loving life energy at the heart of every emotion. And then we can sense the way it got twisted. Our awareness, because we're not judging, is actually a healing attention that can untwist that hose and allow the waters to flow and actually get integrated in our whole body. So a lot of what I've been doing and working with people is when they're stuck saying, well, what's that part trying to do for you? And I
yes.
know you have
Yeah.
similar approaches, because
Yeah.
if we actually sense the fear is trying to protect us, if we
Yes.
sense that we can say thank you to the fear, I'm okay right now, but thank you. The relationship with that part shifts. And so there's some actual possibility of untwisting the fear and freeing up what's under it, which is a care about life.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. And, with the different psychological and contemplative views we have, I mean, I think that's something we certainly have very much in common. You can you can experience that feeling or emotion in many different levels, almost like eyeglasses or a microscope or electron microscope, or then a subpersonality or a persona or a so that we don't just kind of spiritually zap it away with awareness or mindfulness as if it's just a story or just a thought or, as one type of way of working with it. But as you say, it's almost like off the cushion. The way I find that emotions arise is sometimes they'll arise as natural emotional reaction, like like a response to a loud sound, just kind of fear or initial anger will get triggered. But then often they form into thoughts, feelings, sensations, worldview, and kind of sneak up the back of one's head and then take over and get, feel like I'm possessed. And then adrenaline and cortisol goes into the body from there, so that it's like, well, this must be true because it's embodied and happening now. So from here, what do I know and what are the options? And then that, so in some ways, that what I call the mindful move, that first ability to, to step back or to pause, or to take a breath, but the breath leads to an openness and then this other level of consciousness that is, with, but not possessed, and then not staying in a detached witness, but finding a way, as you do with rain, to kind of then continue back to include and have a felt sense of what exactly is this part that feels angry. Where is it in my body? And what is it saying? And what age is it even? Sometimes, but sometimes it's multiple ages. It's got a view. And as soon as you realize that there are parts that you don't have to be egoless, you don't have to be, I'm either a self that is, fearful, or I'm no self. But that's like, no, I'm awake consciousness that has these parts that some are very functional, some are not so functional, some have, but there's the where you're aware from, which level of mind you're mindful from, starts to be the center, but it doesn't, as you say, eliminate or doesn't, it gives you actually more capacity to be a sensitive human being.
That's so, I love the clarity in that. In the sequence that you described, it's very intuitive and wise, and one of the things I think a lot of people want to know and want to trust, but have a hard time, is that that awake awareness is the truth of who I am, that these are
Mm-hmm.
parts, they don't define me. I am not my fear, I am not my anger. And so it feels to me that a lot of spiritual practice is really about cultivating the quality of attention, this accepting, compassionate, clear attention, relaxed attention that allows us to disentangle our identity from the part. And I'll never forget, at one point somebody shared this story about a wise sage, and people would bring their problems where they were most stuck, most small, most feeling like they were unworthy. And and he would swear them to silence, and he'd say, "I have just one question, and that is, what are you unwilling to feel?" And it seems so clear that it's our resistance to feeling life that keeps us identified with the small self. The small self is a patterning of resistance to what is true right here and now. And you described very beautifully the way of we have to pause. There are these patterns that keep us identified. So the sacred art of pausing. I mean, if we can just remember just to pause for a moment, just that. Yeah, that's exactly right. Ah, because if we've paused, there's a little more space, a little more remembrance of presence that can allow us then to have the courage to feel what's here and the tenderness to feel what's here in a way that transforms not the thing but the sense of identification, which is the whole deal, as you know. And one of the things I'm finding so helpful is that even once there is a sense of resting in a larger presence, um, there's often these different thoughts and feelings that re-snag. And it becomes really helpful then to, just, where is the self that's experiencing this? What I've noticed is actually inviting ourselves to sense, okay, where is it living? Like finding a place and a felt sense that correlates with that familiar sense of a self that's owning experience, that's running experience, whatever, that if we can connect with that, it's possible then to just invite that sense of a self to relax in and as the awake awareness that's truly its home. But we
Yeah.
have to see it. We have to catch it. It's like a ghost self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's always trying to go one up on everything else. It's like, are you aware of your feeling? Yes, I am. Well, are you aware of the one that's aware? Yes. In fact, I'm mindful of that one. Oh, I see. And I call that often a transitional subject.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it's not a transitional object like when you're trying to bond with and self-soothe, but it keeps. So, as you said before, getting used to that home base that is actually everywhere, nowhere, and here, and is more of a awake presence, open-hearted field that is aware actually from within your body as much as all around and interconnected. So it's almost that's the home base. It isn't just this separate battery of a physical animal that is physically separate. And that's one of the keys, is to recognize, no, I will always feel, in fact, it's important to feel separate physically from that tree or from as I'm driving a car. So there is a separate dualistic level of experience that is important, and that and feelings happen within there, but who they're happening to isn't a point of view. It's and that feeling at first to the current, protective system or ego defenses is like, oh, wow, it's a little spaced out, or that's a little woo-woo, or that's like, oh, there's no ground here. But if you stay there, it's like, what's the ground made of? Oh, it's made of space. And but it's not just space, it's dancing. It's alive, and it's not other. And that that little pointing, I mean, that's been my interest, is like, okay, if this is already here, as is said in, what you write in and reference in Radical Acceptance and your teachings, and I do as well, as kind of a unique premise that it's not, there is development and training, but there also is more unlearning and untraining in order to discover something that's already here, not something that's, and that, so giving some trust and courage and support to almost directly recognize this, and then abide, and then include. And the key to living from it is you immediately have to include the triggers that will then come up and say, wait a minute, what are you doing? You're going to, you're not going to be able to function from here. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're saying, most of the liberating practice is undoing. It's like having a clenched fist, and if you just bring awareness into the clenched fist, there's no self that has to unclench. There's a natural, the muscles know how to do it. Awareness knows how to wake up. We, just need to pay attention. And I feel like the message for me behind what I'm listening to is that the more we get familiar with boundless awake awareness. The more, it's like every time there's that glimpse, there is some place in us that knows that this is more true than any story or narrative ever. There's a resonance of truth. And the more glimpses, the more sense that not just I'm going to let go into awake awareness, but awake awareness is what I am. Um, that keeps calling us. And one of the things I've noticed in a lot of teachings is, you kind of referred to emptiness dancing, how there's just this living dynamic, that there's a kind of dry emptiness where there's a sense of awake awareness, but it's very vast, and it there's something really wonderful, and yet there's no tenderness. And what feels crucial is, and you talked about this earlier, is that we sense the awareness that is in and through our bodies. And it means really living and feeling from the inside out, that awareness that's in and through our bodies and through and around in every direction. And that is continuous space that's filled with the light of awareness. It's whole. And then when something comes up, there's a natural tenderness in the response. It's like the Tibetans talk about the three qualities of awareness as being that openness and that wakefulness, that knowing, and a natural tender responsiveness. And we don't get that third quality unless we're really embodied, inhabiting it. So I feel like the more glimpses, and I want to name right here that I'm going to be the one to bring it up. Loch has a new app that is just wonderful. It's just wonderful. And it has all different pathways to glimpsing, to really sensing the larger truth of what we are, whether it's, a 1 minute practice or a longer practice. And so I just want to bow to you, Loch, because I know the amount of energy
Mm.
and what it takes, blood, sweat, and tears to create an app. And it's
Yeah.
really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it just felt like it's the delivery system or the contact place that people need in the midst of a busy life, and that because it is already here, they can do a glimpse and then what I call marinate, for longer periods of time instead of meditate. You just glimpse, recognize, realize, embody, feel open-hearted, and now turn off, put the phone away, now. But you have, now you're kind of given a short pointing, and that's been my interest, like you, is how to bring this into contemporary forms, to translate not only the language from the cultures of contemplatives of all traditions, not just, from Western traditions as well as Eastern traditions, and psychological traditions and neuroscience traditions of, freedom and joy and maturity as well, and give tools that are experiential rather than just written supports. This is something that I felt would be a way to share, with people so they could make it part of their lives wherever they are. So yeah, so it's fun. Yeah, and as you say that, so I think that, and that's kind of how I set up, like the intro course is kind of like natural calm is the first one, which is calm abiding, shamatha, but different ways to do that. And then the second one is types of mindfulness, deliberate and effortless. And then embodiment. And then I introduce a kind of way of doing this called local awake awareness, which is a way to actually unhook and drop and have awareness know itself, both within and outside, and rather than efforting to do it or trying to imagine doing it, and then embodiment and what I'm calling there awake loving flow, which you and I have translated in 12 differdifferent ways because we want to try to get at it somehow, like open-hearted awareness, uh, Ram Dass called it loving awareness. You sometimes call it open-hearted presence. So there's something there, or heart-mind.
Yeah.
Those three kind of moves from, being introduced to mindfulness, and which it unfolds naturally through Theravada insight, or to point to the pure awake awareness, and then to point to the non-dual, which in Buddhism, non-dual emphasis isn't just non-dual awareness, pure awareness, it's actually the awareness that is not other than the aliveness. So that's the embodiment. It's like, oh, they're not two. That there's what's called in the Mahamudra, same taste, or simultaneous mind. So this, and then what Thich Nhat Hanh so beautifully called interbeing. So that grounding, interbeing, interconnects us to everyone. And then the operating system, we don't have to go back to create a thinker and a doer in order to be a calmer version of our small selves. But this heart mind, or open-hearted awareness, has that fullness or wholeness, as you say. And so one of the glimpses is literally feeling how we're identified or attached to thought, and that it's like a small self riding a horse of our body, looking out of our eyes, and then this local awareness, which is identified or attached, but is made of this spacious awareness, can unhook and kind of drop and know your jaw from within, your throat from within, and then feel completely embodied, and then find this heart mind or heart space that becomes the center. It also drops to the dantian and to the legs and to the feet and to the ground as well, but kind of is connected from, and it's, many people who this is a good match for, some glimpses don't work for everybody, but those who find it literally just like, I'm home. Like, I've been trying so hard from here to get there by being here. So
it really resonates in a way. It's a guide to move from that smaller, more constricted identity to relax the clench. And yet there's many different pathways that help us to relax the clench. And for many people, the starting place is really feeling stuck in a reactive small self. I often think of Ram Dass, who said, I'm learning to treat my personality as a pet.
Mm-hmm.
It's and you're right that when we're actually resting and knowing it's home, that heart space, our personality actually, the natural intelligence of the universe and the love of the universe actually moves through our personality.
Yeah.
It actually shifts, but there is that learning to trust who we really are. And as you know, one of the pathways that many people have found valuable, we've touched on it a few times, is the rain practice.
Mm-hmm.
Thought I'd just speak a little bit about it, just because so many people, Locke, have told me that rain saved my life. And I thought I'd share that what convinced me to write a book about rain, my book, Radical Compassion's a guidebook to rain, and now this new 20th anniversary edition of Radical Acceptance features it, because it wasn't there 20 years ago. But people have kept giving me that feedback. And I remember about 12 years ago, my own experience with rain, where my mom, who is 82, came down to live with us. And I went into this part of the trance of unworthiness where I was falling short on being really there for my mom, but I was also falling short on this book I was writing. I just felt really trapped in that anxiety and guilt. And I remember one day I was right here in my office, and she came in with a New Yorker article to show me I was actually working on a talk on loving kindness. And I didn't look up, And so she just laid the article down nearby and very graciously walked out. And turned to look at her retreating figure, and I had this thought, I don't know how long I'm going to have her.
Mm.
And so I decided to take a pause and go sit down and practice RAIN. And the acronym stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And so recognize, okay, there's just naming it, there's guilt, there's, kind of fear, and there's anxiety, and kind of you let in all the parts that want to be there, and then sensing what was most compelling was that feeling of guilt, of letting her down. The A, allowing, means truly let life be as it is, not try to fix it, get rid of it, judge it, anything. Just let it be. It's kind of like it's a wave in the ocean. It belongs. And I actually say to myself, this belongs. To not just to undo resistance. And then the I, investigate. There's beliefs there. I'm failing her and causing injury, and I'm failing what most matters to me. And underneath that, this felt sense of a kind of clench in my chest that was squeezing and aching and painful.
Mm.
And so I kind of put my hand on my heart, and I often do this as part of investigating because it's so quick that we exit from our bodies, and just to keep there, and really said, well, what do you need to that guilty squeezing part? And I just needed to trust my goodness, needed to trust I loved her. And that was the compassion of just kind of from my own awake heart, sending that message of, you love her, trust your goodness. And if I said it enough rounds, which I did, it got very tender and sincere. And after those steps, there's what I call after the rain. And after the rain is where we notice the presence that has unfolded. There's a lot of undoing, and when there's an undoing of a clutch, the natural presence, that's who we are, unfolds itself. And I just felt that I was this field of tenderness and wakefulness. The reason I'm sharing is because I started noticing when I was with my mother, rather than guilt, I actually was showing up. Like I wasn't trying to figure out when we'd be done so I could come upstairs and get more work done. And she died maybe 3 years later, but I could still feel the sorrow of that. But I realized that rain saved my life moments with my mom. And that precious, just the way you described those pathways of being with as much awareness as possible, not resisting, and then discovering that what unfolds is really who we are, is so liberating. Because then I got to live with her for more of the truth of my heart. So I thought I'd just share a little bit about the power of rain, because it's so
Yes.
similar to the work you do with parts,
Yes.
and with recognizing the awareness that has emerged and knowing that's our home. I'm really enjoying this, Loch. I feel like we both have developed our languages and our ways of practice, and they're very beautifully synergistic. So this has been
Yes.
a treat. Thank you.
When you start this exercise, bring your awareness within your body and find any emotion that is here now. You can do this exercise with any emotion, pleasant or unpleasant, but when you do this for the first time, please try it with an unpleasant emotion. If you don't have an unpleasant emotion available, choose the unpleasant emotion that you encounter most often in your life. If necessary, you can go to a memory or recent situation in your life to bring up an unpleasant emotion. By practicing this, you will learn that you can feel sad without being sad, anger without being angry, and more. So begin by finding a comfortable way of sitting, and find an emotion in your body, fear, anger, or jealousy, for instance, and begin by feeling it fully. I'll use sadness as an example in the following steps. You can substitute whatever emotion that you choose. Silently say to yourself and feel, I am sad. Fully experience what it's like to say and feel, I am sad. Stay with this experience till you feel it completely. Now, instead of saying, I am sad, take a breath and say and feel, I feel sadness. Notice the shift from I am to I feel. Experience the shift and the new way of feeling from being. From here, feel your relationship to the sadness as a feeling. Now, shift again by saying, I am aware of feeling sadness. Experience awareness of feeling sadness fully. Shift into an observing awareness. Notice the different emotional quality that comes from this. And now shift again and silently say, sadness is welcome. Starting from awareness, experience what welcoming the feeling is like. Feel the awareness energy embody and embrace the feeling. Notice the different emotional quality that comes from welcoming. Sense the support that welcoming brings. And finally, say, awareness and sadness are not separate. Pause to feel awake awareness all around and within, permeating the emotion fully, but without identifying with the emotion or rejecting it. Feel awareness energy with emotion fully from within. Feel the awareness, the energetic aliveness, the deep stillness of presence. Notice the feeling of looking out now at others and the world from this embodied, connected, open-hearted awareness. Thanks for listening. This podcast is offered freely. And if you've enjoyed this, please download a free trial of our new app at mindfulglimpses.com. There we offer daily micro meditations and in-depth programs to support your awakening.